There is a
Good
microphone.
evening, everyone. We're going to get started.
Oh, microphone.
Oh, microphone? I thought I was good. All right.
Hello? Hey, whoa. Let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ted Herman on behalf of the Hershey History Center. I just want to introduce you and welcome Professor John Haddad. I call him professor because he actually was one of my professors at Penn State Harrisburg, and now I'm a professor. So it's kind of like a little Spies Like Us, doctor, although I'm not a doctor, so we just say professor. But he is a great guy and has really a reputation for thorough research, and so I'm really looking forward to his presentation. And I think you've lived here now for about 20 years, so we can call you a local.
Maybe I've earned
Makes
that.
it better, yeah. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Haddad.
Susan, should I use the mic? Do you think, is that better? Yeah. What's better? The mic is better, right? Yes. Yeah, okay. All right, well, it is a pleasure to speak to you this evening about Hersheypark. Back in October, I got a phone call from a gentleman named Bob Watkins. And maybe some of you know Bob Watkins. Well, he's an old friend and neighbor, and so I wondered what he was calling about. I hope nobody from the old neighborhood passed away. Well, Bob is the treasurer here, and he was calling to invite me to speak at the Hershey History Center. And I was delighted because I had come here several times when we lived in Hummelstown, and I was also fortunate enough to do some research here, thanks to Susan, who helped me out about a year ago. So I want to express my gratitude to Susan, to Bob, to Lisa Malloy, the executive director here, to John Martin, the president of the board of directors, and to all the staff and volunteers. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here on this cold December evening. All right, I'm going to begin with a real simple question that probably everybody knows the answer to. And that is, what if you were to name two things that Hersheypark does really well, what would they be? And both of them are represented in this picture right here. Posters. Coasters. Oh, yes, coasters. Yep, and you see, you see a coaster there in the background. And what other thing? Chocolate. Yeah, chocolate theming. Exactly right. And in case you had been a really slow-witted crowd, I have the visuals there. So Hersheypark's formula for success can be boiled down into this mathematical equation: candy theming plus thrill rides equals success. Okay. Now, this entrance is relatively new. It dates back to 2020. And when I started taking my kids to Hersheypark, the entrance didn't look like this. It looked like this. Everybody here remembers this, the classic entrance, right? Back then, I knew what the formula for success was. I knew chocolate theming plus thrill rides equals success. And so I always wondered, way back in like 2008, 2009, I always wondered why the entrance looked like a medieval castle and why we had to walk through both an English village and a German village before we could get to those thrill rides. It was a bit of a head scratcher. Now, I didn't think too much of it at the time because I thought, well, heck, if Hersheypark wants to sell t-shirts and souvenirs and Christmas ornaments and kettle corn in European architecture, well, that's okay, right? Who am I to say? Now, years later, I started the research for this book. And if you look at the title, it's Thrill Ride, The Transformation of Hershepark. So you see the word transformation. And the book covers the entire history of Hersheypark, but its focus is on the 1970s. because that is when Hersheypark went from being an amusement park to being a theme park. And I'll explain what that difference is in a moment. But it suffices to say that the European architecture, which had previously mystified me, made perfect sense once I studied this transformation. The European architecture was really a core part of Hersheypark becoming a theme park. So tonight I'm going to talk about the 1970s, and I'll eventually explain how the park found that magic formula, candy theming plus thrill rides equals to success. Now, to understand the change that happened in the 70s, we need to go back to an earlier era, way back, in fact. Hersheypark was a component of Milton Hershey's paternalism. And sometimes paternalism is a bit of an ugly word, or people think it's a bad word. And here, paternalism is not anything negative at all. Paternalism was Milton Hershey's creative response to the great challenge of his day. And that was the violent clash between organized labor and industrial corporations. Milton Hershey observed this perpetual warfare and saw how destructive it was to both sides. And he imagined a better way. And his better way looked like this. In a carefully planned community, workers inhabited nice homes with affordable mortgages. They paid minimal fees for utilities. They enjoyed free snow and trash removal. They partook of easy transportation along trolley lines. They sent their kids to quality schools. Residents could earn degrees from the Hershey Junior College without paying tuition. And for their leisure, they had a swimming pool, a museum, a sports arena, a library, a theater, a rec center, a zoo, and amazingly, this town had its own amusement park. How great is that? Now, this was a reciprocal relationship. And in return, Milton Hershey expected employees to work hard, to exhibit loyalty, to practice clean living, and to refrain from engaging in the kinds of disruptive strikes that destabilized other companies. Now, the relationship may seem purely transactional, like a quid pro quo, but it wasn't. Both sides felt immense pride in what they had created here in Hershey. Milton Hershey referred to the town as an industrial utopia with no poverty and no evil. Now, there's some hyperbole or exaggeration in that statement, but you know what? It was mostly true. Hershey was a nice place to work, live, and raise a family. And residents did feel fortunate to live here. And above all else, they loved Hersheypark. Now, to give you a sense for the role that the park played in people's lives, I'm going to read a passage from the book that's based off of oral histories from the Hershey Dairy Township Historical Society and the Hershey Community Archives. Let me see if I can do that with, while holding the microphone. All right, ready? Here we go. It's always a little dicey to read from your book because if people think the writing stinks, they're just not going to buy it. So I'll take the gamble here. It was a happy time. Later in their lives, many residents volunteered to share their memories of their idyllic early years in Hershey. As one reads their oral histories, one cannot help but make 4 observations. First, when community members reminisced, they almost always funneled to the same place, Hersheypark. They wish to talk about the old park and its meaningful connection to their lives. Second, one cannot miss the uniformly positive nature of their recollections. Their memories of the park are usually pristine, blemished not even by a speck of negativity. In describing the park, they adopted the same tone that an elderly Adam and Eve might have employed when questioned about their youths in Eden. "When we went to the park," one resident recalled, "we thought we were going into a happy paradise." "It was a little utopia for kids," said another. One elderly woman said that her old memories were, quote, "like a dream." The joy that residents felt in the park echoes through their oral histories as nostalgia. Third, community members ascribed significance to the fact that Hersheypark was not enclosed in fencing and did not charge admission. "It was all open," recalled George Lafferty, "and everything was free. You could go where you wanted, spend what you wanted, and if you wanted to ride, you bought tickets." "It was a family park then," remembered another resident, who stressed that there were no fences. Residents viewed the free and open nature of Hersheypark as highly meaningful. They understood the park as a special place that existed for them. This feeling of entitlement is what Mary Schenk, a local teacher, was expressing when she referred to it as our people's park. Fourth, you observe the underlying sameness of their park memories. With some variation, a day at the park followed a clear pattern. After a family arrived with its picnic basket, the group enjoyed a midday meal at the picnic pavilion, which gave way to an afternoon of rides, arcade games, swimming, baseball, and ice cream cones. Later in the day, the family congregated at the band shell to take in a rousing concert. After the show, families with small children trooped back to their cars or to the trolley, while teenagers and adults headed to the Starlight Ballroom for an evening of big band music and dance. Save for minor differences, everyone seemed to be describing the same day, what we might call the perfect Hershey day, which they enjoyed repeatedly during their youth. All right, and that's one thing I noticed in the research. So many people talk about Hersheypark, and it's the same day repeated over and over and over again, and it was wonderful, idyllic. But all good things must come to an end. By the late 1960s, Hersheypark had become run down. Rides were outdated, and since the park was not enclosed in fencing, anyone could enter at any hour. There were acts of vandalism. Many families stopped coming. One executive called it, quote, an iron park with a bunch of clanging rides and some picnic space. Now, you all know what Hershey Estates is. Hershey Estates was what they used to call HE&R. So Hershey Estates is the entity that owned and managed the park. Hershey Estates had a mammoth decision to make. They could, A, do nothing and let the park deteriorate. B, close the park forever, that would be sad. Or C, renovate the park. So this is a big decision happening right around the late 60s, early 70s. Well, they chose option C, and thank heaven for that. But renovating entailed more than making a few minor fixes and adding a couple new rides. And that's because the industry itself was changing. In 1955, Disneyland exploded on the American landscape. Now, Disneyland was not an amusement park. In fact, Walt Disney hated amusement parks. He thought they were grubby places run by unsavory carnies who just wanted to take your money from you. Not that Disneyland doesn't want to also take your money from you. Anyway, Walt Disney envisioned a new kind of entertainment complex, one that did not yet have a name, but that later came to be called a theme park. Now, what exactly is a theme park? All right, well, a theme park has the following 5 features. 1, a theme park is surrounded by barriers to block out the outside world and immerse you in a fantasy environment. You pay a single price for admission, and that gives you access to all rides and attractions. And that was revolutionary at the time. 2, a theme park is themed. Disneyland has 5 themed realms. There's Main Street, USA, which is small town America, circa 1900. Fantasyland, where you see Sleeping Beauty's castle. Tomorrowland, a depiction of the future. Frontierland, a portrayal of the Wild West. And Adventureland, which is some kind of a jungle-themed place. 3, theme parks have unique rides. Theming means that all rides have to be customized to fit their stories. So a theme park will not have any off-the-shelf carnival rides like bumper cars or Ferris wheel. And this is why theme parks are so expensive to build. 4, a theme park is an immaculately clean space with fancy landscaping. And 5, of course, theme parks have roving mascots who spread good cheer. So those 5 things. Now, Disneyland's massive popularity in the 1950s inspired imitators in the 1960s. An example is Six Flags over Texas, but there were dozens and dozens of other new theme parks in the 60s. You could say there was a theme park craze. And this craze put pressure on old-fashioned amusement parks by making them seem outdated. In Hershey, executives saw which way the wind was blowing. And so their decision was to hire California-based Randall, Duell and Associates, which we can just call RDA. Randall, Duell and Associates, which was the top firm in the fledgling industry of theme park design. Now, RDA had designed Six Flags over Texas and Six Flags over Georgia, Astro World, Magic Mountain in California, the Universal Studio Tour, and many, many others. And RDA's job was to work with Hershey Estates to turn the amusement park, Hersheypark, 2 words, into Hersheypark, which would be a theme park. Now, the primary objective was to make money. That's what theme parks do. They are revenue generators. And Hershey Estates commissioned a study that predicted that a theme park in Hershey would flourish because it would attract the local population as well as tourists from the big metropolitan areas, Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, and Washington. However, so that was the primary objective, make money. Hershey was unique among all theme parks in the country in that it also pursued a secondary objective, and that was to help the local community adjust to change. People were upset. Why? Why were they upset? Well, one reason was that in the late 60s, the various Hershey corporate entities dismantled Mr. Hershey's paternalistic vision. So all those free services and amenities that I listed a moment ago, those went away in the late 60s. Another reason people were upset is that many of their favorite landmarks, like the bandshell or the Starlight Ballroom, got demolished to make room for new attractions in Hersheypark. But most of all, residents hated watching a fence go up around their beloved park. John O. Hershey and Bruce McKinney were executives overseeing the redevelopment. And Bruce is actually right here with us today. Give us a wave, Bruce. John O. Hershey and Bruce McKinney dealt with angry residents. And I'll read a little passage from the book. All right. One change proved harder than others for the community to accept: the erection of a fence around Hersheypark. Gone forever were the days when guests could stroll in from multiple points, enjoy a leisurely picnic, and perhaps drop a few dimes on rides. Under that free and open system, community members had perceived the park as existing for them. In its new incarnation, the park would follow a different model, one that would fundamentally redefine its relationship to the community. Park goers would enter through a single gate with an impenetrable fence preventing ingress from other locations. At the gate, all visitors, regardless of where they came from, would pay a single admission fee that covered all rides and attractions. Hershey would also discontinue the popular tradition of picnicking, which for decades had kept the outing affordable for families on a budget. Under the new system, guests could only eat park food purchased on the premises. These structural changes were, of course, necessary if Hershey hoped to meet the Disney standard. Nevertheless, they sent an unmistakable signal to local residents: the park no longer existed for them. If the old Hersheypark had symbolized Milton Hershey's vision in the town's collective consciousness, it remained to be seen what the new Hersheypark would come to represent. Let me skip down a little. Angry residents focused on the fence. The fence went up, recalled Ned Book, who was an executive, and that was, quote, trauma for the community. The community didn't like the fence going up, agreed Bruce McKinney, who added, quote, there were a lot of people within the community who felt that their park had been taken away from them. They've moved away from the community ideal, many remonstrated. They're shutting us out. Such people were not shy about griping to John O. Hershey, who was on the receiving end of their wrath. Gosh, I'm just getting letters and phone calls from people in the community, an exasperated John O. Hershey said, with the terrible thing I'm doing by closing off the park. Many people asked why they were made to, quote unquote, suffer in order to accommodate people from all over the country. For those who objected to change in Hershey, the fence became a powerful symbol. It stood for corporate greed, the abandonment of community, and the death of Mr. Hershey's dream. Very ominous. All right. So there was turmoil in Hershey. Now, the good news was that Hershey executives were sensitive to the feelings of the community. They came up with an ingenious solution. Now remember that theme parks have to be themed. Well, the Hershey folks worked with RDA to design the new park in such a way that it could ease the community toward the acceptance of change. The new park honored the past and stressed the inevitability of change. Now, Bruce McKinney, who was a major player during the redevelopment, explained the design principle this way. He said, Hershey residents would see transition in the architecture of the park and be comfortable with change in their world. So that's a really profound statement. And in a moment, you'll see exactly what he meant. All right, let's fast forward to the grand reopening in 1973. There was a preview event for the media and the local community. Now, the park back then was built to accommodate 10,000 guests comfortably. But more than 20,000 showed up at this event. So it was quite a scene. I mean, if you wanted to buy French fries or chicken fingers, you were going to wait an hour and a half. Local residents flooded the park, super curious to see what it looked like. All right, well, what did it look like? The answer may surprise you. There was theming in 1973, but the theme was not chocolate. The theme was history. If you were a guest, you would be taken back in time to experience the past. The park acted like a time machine. So let's step inside. All right, here we are approaching Hersheypark from the parking lot on a tram, and you can see in the background the tower of an old English castle. That is a part of Tudor Square. Yeah, you remember these places. Tudor Square presented the architecture, costumes, and culture of merry old England during the Tudor dynasty, which included Queen Elizabeth's reign, William Shakespeare's plays, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, and the first English colony in North America. Tudor Square celebrated England at a time when it acquired the ability to imprint its culture on the New World and eventually on Pennsylvania. The next themed area you encountered was Rhineland. Rhineland represented a different origin story, the migration of Germanic people from the Rhine River region to central PA starting in the late 1600s. Next, Der Deutsche Platz, which I probably didn't pronounce right, but it translates to the Dutch place. Der Deutsche Platz showcased the culture those Germanic immigrants created. It celebrated farm life, traditions, and the handicrafts of the Pennsylvania Dutch. The centerpiece was the craft barn, where you could watch artisans making things, much like colonial Williamsburg. And you could buy what they made: a broom, a basket, a rug, a horseshoe. They even had a cigar maker. So remember, this was the early 70s. So Dad could buy himself a stogie and smoke it. Next, Carousel Circle. And Carousel Circle had a sentimental mood, kind of like Disneyland's Main Street USA. Carousel Circle symbolized small-town American life of yesteryear and the town of Hershey the way it was before all the big changes. In fact, the carousel was a holdover from the old amusement park. It was a revolving nostalgia machine, and people loved it, and they still do. Hersheypark planned to build Minetown, a themed area that would honor Pennsylvania's anthracite coal mining history. Unfortunately, Minetown was never fully actualized but the park did feature a couple coal-themed rides like the Coal Cracker, which is my personal favorite, and Tower Plaza. Tower Plaza celebrated contemporary Pennsylvania, and it featured the Kissing Tower, intended to be a symbol of modernity like Seattle's Space Needle. It lifts riders to a zenith of about 330 feet and rotates them in the air. Okay, so you see what it looked like. And clearly there was a theme of time travel going on in Hersheypark. And if we look at the map, we see that the park channeled visitors through historical periods in chronological order. You really did move through time, progressing from old world Europe to our small town past, to the agricultural era, to the industrial age, and finally to modern times. In this way, Hersheypark was designed to work on visitors, to persuade them to embrace change, as Bruce McKinney said. Guests were supposed to accept that while we honored the past, change is inevitable and not a bad thing. And by the way, this idea to compel visitors to experience history, that comes to us from Disneyland. If we look at the layout for Disneyland, we see that Walt Disney also designed the park to ensure that every visitor experienced the past, specifically Main Street, USA. If you visit Disneyland today, I think all Disneylands, with the exception of Shanghai, you are forced to go through Main Street, USA, which is a celebration of small town America. All right, so that's what it looks like. I have shown you what Hersheypark, how it appeared in the early 1970s, and you might be a little confused, because after all, I led off this presentation by sharing the formula for success as candy theming plus thrill rides equals success, and so far, both of those things have been conspicuously absent. We haven't seen any chocolate, and we haven't seen any roller coasters. All right, so let's talk for a moment here about how those things entered into the equation. If you've been to Hersheypark, and probably all of you have, you know that roller coasters and other thrill rides dominate the skyline. Yet, coasters were not part of the 1970s redevelopment. RDA did favor preserving the Comet roller coaster, which was built in 1946, but that's all. In fact, RDA urged Hershey not to invest in thrill rides. Kind of counterintuitive, but they actually had a logic. And their logic was that thrill rides appeal mainly to teenagers, and therefore it was unwise to purchase expensive rides like super coasters that pleased one age demographic while neglecting all others. Instead, RDA believes strongly in themed environments like what Disneyland has, because all ages can enjoy them. And that's why you get Tudor Square and Rhineland. A grandparent and grandchild can both enjoy it at the same time. Now, it was in the late 1970s that Hershey moved away from this philosophy. And the catalyst for that shift was this thing on the right. It is a roller coaster called the Revolution. And the Revolution was the creation of German engineer Anton Schwarzkopf. All right, so what's so special about this roller coaster out in California? Well, it had a vertical loop. And a looping roller coaster was remarkable because the world had last seen one around 1900. In other words, the looping coaster had vanished from the scene 75 years earlier. Now, why did it disappear, and why did it come back? All right, I'm going to read one last passage. Why had the vertical loop vanished? Simply put, the laws of physics render looping prohibitively precarious and unpleasant. This was a lesson that the hardy souls who ventured onto Coney Island's infamous flip-flap learned, even if they did not grasp the mathematics. As riders hurtling forward at a high speed hit the loop's daunting curve, they curled upward along the steep incline, causing gravitational forces to spike. Riders abruptly felt many times heavier than they were, and some also became nauseatingly sick as blood rushed away from their heads. This was not fun. This was torture. Anton Schwarzkopf, who studied the physics of this loop, estimated that it subjected people to an astounding 12 Gs. In comparison, the Apollo astronauts experienced 3 or 4 Gs during liftoff. Expensive to build and hazardous to rise, the early looping coasters, like the flip-flap, failed to establish themselves in the amusement park industry and disappeared after just a few years in operation. The concept lay dormant until 1973, the year that Schwarzkopf revived it. His main innovation was geometric. By pressing the circular loop into a teardrop shape, he reduced the gravitational forces to a safe level while still delivering plenty of exhilaration. In the United States, theme parks responded to the news with anticipatory excitement. That is, until the insurance companies balked. For them, a looping coaster with inherent safety risks exposed them to an intolerable amount of liability. While expressing many doubts about Schwarzkopf's coaster, insurance companies zeroed in on its restraining bar. Centrifugal force would keep riders securely in place as long as the cars remained in motion on the loop. But what if a coaster train slowed or stopped at precisely the wrong time when riders were in the loop? Would upside-down riders fall to certain injury and possible death? Maybe. To convince his skeptics, Schwarzkopf took a gamble. He flew representatives from the major American insurance companies to West Germany to demonstrate the safety of his prototype. After loading these guests, remember they're all insurance people, after loading his guests into the cars and sending them on their way, he did something daring. He braked the coaster train so that it came to a full stop at the peak of the loop. Riders screamed out of sheer terror, but none of them fell out because the restraining bar worked. With his naysayers convinced, though traumatized, Schwarzkopf prepared for the avalanche of business that was sure to come. And it did. And the first customer was Magic Mountain Theme Park in California, which commissioned the revolution. All right, now let me skip down here to where Hersheypark enters the story. Bruce, this is your big moment. This is where Bruce McKinney, by himself, changes the trajectory of Hersheypark history. Bruce McKinney remembered the exact moment that inspiration struck. In 1976, he traveled to New Orleans to attend the annual convention of the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. At the event, he happened upon an issue of Amusement Business, the industry's trade journal, and he flipped right to a story on Magic Mountain's new attraction. And there it was. McKinney beheld a photograph taken in West Germany of Schwarzkopf's people running tests on the revolution. McKinney marveled at the terrifying yet elegant geometry of the majestic loop. The article detailed how the supercoaster had been dismantled in Germany and all 650 pieces shipped to California, where engineers had reassembled it like a jigsaw puzzle. However, McKinney was not concerned with the logistics. He had started to dream. I harbored all these feelings of what it would be like to have that thing in Hershey, McKinney recalled. After the convention, McKinney pitched his idea to the Herco board. Though a Schwarzkopf-designed coaster would cost $3 million, a staggering sum at the time, McKinney guaranteed that it would, quote, put us on the map. The board, though leery about the price tag, decided to place its trust in McKinney, and shortly thereafter, Schwarzkopf visited Hershey to scout out sites for the new attraction. Anybody know what it was? I can't fool this crowd. The new attraction was the Super Duper Looper, and McKinney was right to buy it. The Looper caused a sensation when it opened in 1977. The park set an attendance record and sold millions of these "I Survived" t-shirts. A local newspaper said that riding the Looper was better than sex. The Looper's success taught Hersheypark a valuable lesson. A sensational thrill ride can act like a magnet and draw big crowds into the park. And in the 1980s and 1990s, Hersheypark moved away from historical theming and invested heavily in thrill rides, and it still does today. But what about candy-themed fun, the other part of the formula? Well, you might be wondering why the redevelopment did not feature strolling 7-foot Hershey bars and Hershey Kisses. Since, doesn't that seem like a no-brainer? So why didn't they do it? Well, in truth, Hershey Estates wanted to do this from day one. But Hershey Estates and Hershey Foods were separate corporate entities. And Hershey Foods controlled the famous candy brands. And when Hershey Estates approached Hershey Foods, the latter declined. From its perspective, the park was new and unproven and might not succeed. Hershey Foods did not want people to associate its valuable brands with a failed theme park. Pushed away, Hershey Estates decided to follow the Disney example by creating funny and lovable animal mascots. The Furry Tales were born. The Furry Tales, anyone remember the Furry Tales? Yeah, oh yeah. The Furry Tales debuted in 1974, and their costumes were made by Allie and Bill Scollins' company, which specialized in mascot creation. A few years earlier, the Scollins had made the costumes for the popular children's television show, The Banana Splits, which I remember watching in the 70s. Now, kids love the Furry Tales, Nevertheless, we get candy characters later that same year in 1974. So how did this happen? Well, it's a funny story. One day, Bill Scollin asked Bruce McKinney why the park wasn't deploying candy characters. And McKinney explained the whole lamentable problem with Hershey Foods. We don't have the rights. They own the rights. We can't do it. Well, Scollin had a hunch. He suspected that Hershey Foods executives were rejecting the idea because they only understood it in the abstract. They were failing to imagine the magic potential of product characters because they could not see and touch one. Acting on his own initiative, Scollin stitched together a Reese's Cup costume and showed it to McKinney, who was impressed. McKinney then escorted Scollin in costume to the Rotary Club, where they found Robert Reese, the son of H.B. Reese, the founder of Reese's Company. Robert Reese loved it. Scollin's next stop was the corporate offices at Hershey Foods, and their executives took an instant liking to the big, lovable, foamy orange character. They saw the potential for a synergy, much like the synergy that Disney enjoyed. Disney's movies inspired a desire in children to visit Disneyland, and Disneyland advertised the movies. And both Disneyland and the movies helped the company sell toys. In other words, each part of the Disney corporate empire made the other parts more valuable. So Hershey Foods and Hershey Estates imagined a smaller but similar synergy. Hersheypark would promote the candy, each wrapper of which would advertise Hersheypark. So at Hershey Foods, all resistance melted away, and that is how we get not just strolling candy bars, but product branding all over Hersheypark. In the words of Bruce McKinney, quote, "We started to chocolatize Hersheypark. We Hersheyized everything." All right, with thrill rides and chocolate theming, the park had the two things that would form its identity for decades ahead and still make Hersheypark what it is today. All right, thank you, folks. I'm going to stop right there because I think I'm out of time, but I would be happy to take any questions from folks in the audience. Yeah. Yes?
I'm curious, how many years was it actually closed for the transition?
Well, technically, it was never closed, right? Bruce, I'm right about that. Yeah, it was a construction area, and you couldn't go into certain parts, but they kept part of it open. But still, people were really curious about it, and the monorail. At one point, the monorail, you could get on them. Now you can only get on and off the monorail inside the park. But previously, you could get on the monorail outside the park and go over the park. Yes, so people were they would do the monorail ride. Yes, that old route, and sort of say, hey, what's going on? What are they building there? So it was never closed. Yeah.
I'm curious, and Mr. King might be able to answer this better, but 72 was also when Agnes hit.
Yeah.
There used to be a big sign in the park, in the zoo, as the monorail went by, it would say, once the site of the Hershey Zoo till the flood of 72.
My son.
Is that right? Yeah, that was, you would see that on the monorail ride.
Right.
You'd see that as you walked down,
Right.
as my dad walked down from the bank to go home for lunch.
Exactly.
But that was, my question is, how did that impact the rebuild? You were trying to open up the park in 72.
It did hit very hard for a couple of months, really. It did hit construction. But as we rode the monorail and you saw this debris in the zoo,
Yeah.
I figured someone had to figure out what was going on. So that's why I came up with the sign.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a few paragraphs on that in the book, and it was, as Mr. McKinney just said, it was quite a blow. I mean, it was turning the park from an amusement park into a world-class theme park on par with Disney was a major undertaking. And the last thing you needed was the storm of the century. right? The creek flooded, and so lots of rides were underwater. As I was reading oral histories about that event, I was really struck by the dedication of Hersheypark employees and staff. It was all hands on deck, and people were there trying to, rescue the animals was the main thing. Let's see if we can get all the animals, to some kind of a safe place. And there's took six guys, like the Aqua Theater, where the two dolphins were, with Dolly and Skipper. Yeah, Dolly and Skipper. Yeah, so people went in there. That had turned into like chocolate milk because so much mud was pouring into the tank. And it's like 6 guys went there and somehow got Dolly and Skipper onto these big canvas sheets, and then they hoisted them and they lifted them and they carried them up a hill in the driving rain and got Dolly and Skipper into a swimming pool where they lived for a few days. Wasn't ideal, but they made it until the rain stopped and they could clean out the tank and get Dolly and Skipper back home. And the elephant lived in the box office of the Hershey Arena. So they were improvising here as much as they could, but most animals got saved. Some rides, it did destroy some rides. The Lost River. Yeah, the Lost River was one of the favorite rides of the community. And I think, Bruce, you can share your memory, but my thought was they were probably going to keep it and hold on to it, but then Agnes happened, and that destroyed the ride. Yeah, it might have been one of the rides that made the transition from the old Hersheypark to the new Hersheypark.
That was one of the exam rides, wasn't it?
Yes.
The kids broke the trunk off the elephant.
Right.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it had that famous elephant statue. Yeah, and kids broke that off. Oh, I wish I'd known that. That would have been a nice detail for the book. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering when they took over and cut off Derry Road.
Now that I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Bruce, do you know?
That was in the early 70s, late 70, 71.
Yeah.
Because Derry Road used to be the main highway from Gettysburg to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and one of a lot of people did not want the park. That was one of the surprising things to me is, as I'm not from here, and as I was reading about it, I thought, oh gosh, why wouldn't you want a world-class theme park that's going to bring so much business? But people were like, well, we like the town the way it is, but also we don't want traffic problems and things like that. So a lot of people were opposed to the park, and so it was really an incredible sales job by.
It's the main highway.
Yeah, it's the main highway.
It's the main highway.
Yeah.
Well, it was Derry Church, and it was Derry Road. So,
But
I grew up on Derry Road, East Derry. And
I used to get on Derry Street in Harrisburg.
Yeah.
And you followed Derry the whole way down through.
And then in the early 70s.
Every place, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I follow the old road.
Is that right?
It's still. We wound around and the airport was, and to come into Hershey, you had to go up behind the boys' high school to get into Hershey.
Yeah, it was a major adjustment for people living there, and I can only imagine. Again, I wasn't here. I accessed it through the corporate records, and that was the 70s. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't mean to dominate. But
Yeah, no, it's all right.
But this also, maybe Mr. McKinney can address this too. It seemed to me there was a bit of a transition where you could buy tickets for an individual ride. But then I remember as a kid, you could buy a bracelet that got joined to every ride.
That's right.
Now it still was open at that point.
Right.
That
So,
was after.
okay.
There were 2
That
years
was
of
after you go
transition.
in free and just buy whatever ride you wanted to go on.
Had a little metal clip around
There was a little bristle.
Yeah, yeah.
Bruce, when did they move to just?
73.
Yeah. So for the grand reopening, that was when it was just one price, access to everything. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Do you remember what the first original price was?
It was pretty cheap. I did come across that. I mean, it was astoundingly cheap.
$6.95.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's in my head, is that what it was?
I think the first one was $3.
Very cheap.
Yeah.
People thought that was an exorbitant price to pay, but because it was, it was a different time.
Yeah, my husband and I, we moved here in '73, so
Really?
just as the park opened,
Did you go the first year?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I moved here in
And
70.
one of,
Did you go the first year? No.
I can't do the rides, I get my.
one of my favorite memories was when the Super Duper Looper opened. And we used to come in after work, and we were there when the park was closing early. So we got on the Looper, and it was wonderful, and we slowed down as we came into the gate, and there was nobody in line, so the operator, it was like 10 minutes till the park closed.
And just do it over and over
And they
and
said,
over.
"You want to go again?" And everybody went, "Yay!" And then the second time when we came in and we slowed, not quite so much, and yay! So we did it again. By the fourth time, Mike and I were probably the oldest people on there, and we were in our late 20s, And it took us a while before we went back on the Looper after that.
One of the funniest stories about the Looper, it also concerns, Bruce is a part of, since Bruce was one of the players during the redevelopment, he figures into a lot of the stories, because you were just simply there while all this was happening. But there was a preview event where before the Super Duper Looper opened for the general public, there was a preview event for members of the media. And the idea was bring in radio disc jockeys and newspaper writers and television personalities, and they would apparently serve them cocktails and drinks and so on to build up their courage.
Free games, free food.
Yeah, free games, free food, and then everyone would get to ride the Super Duper Looper before it opened to the public. And Sally McKinney, and for the first ride, I can only imagine it, but everybody was gathered around this, this incredible serpentine coaster. And again, no one's been on a ride like this ever, unless you had happened to have been out in California. It would be impossible to ride a coaster like this. But Bruce McKinney and his wife Sally, Bruce, apparently you looked at Sally and said, "Well, I'm an executive here. We have to be the first one on there." And Sally said, "I don't know if I like this, but I'm a good spouse, so I'll support my husband."
And as a mother of your children, I do not want to go on.
As a mother of your children, I do not want to go on. But you got on there, and you were just hoping that it would go smoothly, and what happened is it started, you left the station, it started, and then you got to like the top of the first hill, and you went through the loop, and got to a hill, and there it stopped. So the first riders ever on the Super Duper Looper got stranded. And you had to walk down,
Photographers taking pictures.
Yeah, that is the epitome of an inauspicious start. But everything went well after that. I mean, it was one of the best summers in Hersheypark history.
There are still days from 1977 that are record days.
Still, that's incredible. Yeah.
We had to close the park, I think, 3 days.
Yeah.
3 times we had to close the park.
Yeah, I read that. At a certain point, the crowds were so large in Hersheypark that they had to stop letting people in. Yeah. And the park was making so much money that, how back then it was all cash, right? And they were collecting so much cash that the vaults were filling up. So they had to have the bank, the armored truck, make multiple visits to collect all the money. It's a good problem to have. Yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
You depicted a ride that I used to like. I can't remember its name. You would there were 2 towers next to each other, and you would get in a little cart, and you'd go up in the inside of a tunnel, and then you.
Oh yeah.
Then you'd spin around the outside.
Yeah.
That was a fun one.
A lot of people had fond memories of that one, and the other one being the what is it? The giant.
Giant wheel.
The giant wheel, yeah. Which is a pretty substantial ride. Yeah.
But my best memory is, you ready?
Yeah.
Jimmy Dorsey my senior year in high school, we came from Biglerville
And you
and
were
attended Jimmy Dorsey
in the ballroom. Oh my gosh. Well, I bet it was it packed?
yes.
Yeah.
It was the in thing at that time.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot on that, or a little bit at least, on that era in the book, because it sounds like really
It broke my
wonderful.
heart when they tore it down.
Yeah, yeah. And you're not alone. A lot of people were really upset to see certain landmarks go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know Bruce, I mean, you're in there saying like, oh, I wish we didn't have to tear this stuff down, because the community was so attached to these landmarks. Because people had been going there since they were a kid. Some people had like proposed to the woman who would be, their wives, at the band shell, and then,
And that
the
was
demolitions
1947.
happened. It was in 47.
47.
Yeah, yeah. And they all went away to make room for new attractions. Yeah. Oh yes, that's right. You had your hand
I
up.
was just curious, someplace along the line, there was a ride that the trial name for it was Mary Dairy Dip.
Ah.
Which
All right.
never, what did that become?
That's a good story.
At our dining room table, my two daughters and wife were sitting, and I came to them and said, we have this new ride coming in, it's first on the East Coast. And it's gonna have a unique name. And I said, I've got 2 examples of the name. Let me give you my first choice. Mary Dairy Dip. And the reaction of the 2 girls and my wife was like stone-faced. Well, the other one is Super Duper Looper.
Yeah.
Eyes went up.
Yeah.
So you got outvoted
I got voted.
by the women in your family. Dairy Dips.
Mary
Yeah.
Dairy Dip was recreated by Franklin Shear years later on a slide.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
slide was the Mary
Yeah.
Dairy Dip.
It has since been done away with.
Yeah. But that one lasted quite a while, didn't it? Yeah. Into the 21st century, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
You mentioned Bruce did really intelligent and smart things, like bringing the media in to experience Hersheypark when we had new attractions. And my question for you and him is like, did that obviously help when there was an unfortunate death of a maintenance worker in '77, which could have really gotten you some bad publicity?
Yeah.
And how did that affect that and the insurance
Yeah.
at that time after something like that happened?
Yeah, the relationship with the press had been established, and it was good that we kept that. That was a very unfortunate situation in 1977. A young maintenance man, young student, actually,
Right. It was sort of like an internship almost, right? Yeah.
from Lebanon.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. The Looper was, how do you want to say it? Quixotic, unpredictable, because it was a prototype. It was one of a kind, and it did incredible things, right? It was a marvel of engineering for its time. It did incredible things that no other coaster other than the Revolution in California could do. But it also broke down a lot. I read a lot of maintenance records, and you can see, a lot of the Hersheypark maintenance staff are, at these, I read the minutes of the meetings, and they're like, Looper's out again today. And in the press office, we're getting angry letters from people who drove far, they came from far away, mainly to ride the Looper, and it was shut down that
They
day.
used to fly in too.
Or even fly in,
And they closed the airport.
Yeah, because, yeah.
As a kid, if kids were talking, I went to the park today, did the Looper work?
Yeah, right,
But
right.
Bruce knows how valuable
Yeah.
his maintenance team was.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And of course,
Heroic.
Those guys were
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
You'd see them riding around on a moped or a scooter or whatever, but they were on a mission to make sure stuff was working.
And that's,
They were
yeah,
nice at fixing stuff in the
they sure were.
sure.
But that's, one of the differences between an amusement park and a theme park. Theme park really takes it up a level. If you're attracting people from all over the country, like Hersheypark started to do, You know, you have to take care of problems lickety-split. There can't be garbage around or anything like that. The place has to be immaculately clean, which it was. Like, it won awards in the 1970s for its appearance.
And
Yeah.
Johnny, we had one of those maintenance folks here this evening.
Oh,
Rick Nolan, right over there.
Where's Rick? Hey, all right. Rick, what did you work on? Which rides?
Super duper looper.
Oh my God.
It's one of many. I worked on one.
Well, Rick, if Penn State University Press ever says, "Hey John, we want to do a second edition," and I get to add things, would you sit for an interview? Well, I would.
The other side of it.
I would love to hear that side. I probably read something that you wrote, because again, I read the minutes of the meetings and so on, where you and others were sitting around a table talking about, okay, here's the problems we're dealing with today.
I'd get blasted every day. No, I'd leave the park and, you know, the looper run the whole day. And I remember the day we ran the whole day, like John Chuddy came and shook her hand and said, "Nice job." And I mean, I'd get away and go, "Well, your looper's down again." And I'd take it home with me, you know. This stuff was on you. It was quite a challenge for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Because, well, Anton came over and rode it. You know, I was there
Yeah.
when he did that. And my boss said, "Stop it right now at the top of the loop." He couldn't stop it up there, but yeah, he was,
People don't, he's not a household name or anything, but he's really important in theme park history. Yeah.
So we went and rode, we were gonna get the ride, and they sent us out to the convention in California, and that's where we had a launch coaster out there, because I sat down in the meeting, I'm not sure if Mr. McKinney was there or not, and said, our future of the park, and we're gonna go in the theme, we might even have a roller coaster that goes upside down. Really? Come on now. Little did I
Come
know,
on.
man, I was cursed.
Pulling my
It was
leg.
right at me, and I said, why me? But, you know, and we talked about those things, and he said the park, wanted price admission. You know, they came in there, we tried wristbands to see how it would work at night and it was going crazy. Or how we were blessed with Agnes, the carousel was right down at Spring Creek, and we moved it up to the carousel circle. Otherwise, that would have been ruined.
Yeah.
And that's, you can't replace it.
Because the carousel was more than 50 years old at that time. It was 60 or 70 years old. It was, you know, vintage. You gotta go.
That was
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
I'm sorry, we had a granddaughter who was in a concert tonight.
Yeah, that's the priority. You gotta go to that. Well, a Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you as well.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's almost interesting, like in the 70s, when you go to this animosity, you know, the fence around this park.
Yeah.
It almost became a rite of passage for anyone in the community's kids to work at the
Yeah.
park. So
Yeah.
I can't, I mean, I went to Palmyra, and everyone either wanted to or had worked at the park.
Yeah.
So one generation later, you get back to the love of it and to realize that you are integrated in the community, you're providing jobs.
Yeah, and there's several reasons that Hersheypark won over the community, which again was very resistant to the whole idea of a theme park. And one of them, I think the design principle worked. I mean, I think people walked through there and they said, wow, I see my heritage before me in 3 dimensions. So I feel really respected and valued. I think that mattered a lot. But I also think, you know, the park was such an economic generator. You know, Bruce, there's a quote from one of your oral histories. Bruce kindly gave several oral histories, and in one of them, he talks about how other Pennsylvania towns that needed business and wanted tourism, they were envious, positively jealous of Hershey, and even said, hey, can Hershey build a Hersheypark equivalent out where we are, out west? So the economics was critical in winning people over, and a part of that is the jobs. In the last chapter of the book, I write about some of the holdouts, some people who, even into the 80s and so on, still, nope, I'm not setting foot in that new park. I hate it. You know, they trampled on Milton Hershey's dream. You know, but one of those people, I can't remember her name, but she's in an oral history. So she's sort of adamant about hating the park. And then her grandson gets a job as the walking Hershey bar. And he comes up to his grandmom and gives her a hug, and I don't know if she ever went into the park, but at least some of her resistance melted away at that time, because she saw exactly what you said. You know, this park is producing jobs and something wholesome and productive for teenagers to do.
Yeah, exactly. My daughter still talks about her years as a face painter.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
And she was there before copyright made a difference, so she was painting all the Disney characters.
Oh my gosh. Before copyright. Yeah. Now they'll come after you. Yeah, exactly. No, my wife Catherine, who's right here, give him a wave, Cat. But we live in Lancaster now, but if we had stayed, I'm pretty sure both of our kids would have been regular employees, at least in the summertime months at Hersheypark. And yours worked. Yeah.
Many marriages came out of it.
Yeah, people met each other during those summer jobs.
And for me, it was the best way to teach her how to drive, because we lived in Camp Hill. And coming across on 322, it was almost highway, but not quite.
Yeah.
So when you've got a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, whatever it was at the time, she was the only one of her friends that wasn't afraid to get on the highway when she got her license. Because everybody else just drove in the
little neighborhood. And she came all the way over to Hershey for her job. Oh, that's something.
So did I, as the person that had to be there when they're driving.
Right. Oh, that's a good story.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions? Alrighty, folks. Thank you so much. Happy holidays to you all. Stay warm. Very cold out there. I'll take ideas. Yeah.
And it just closed. We didn't get it.
Hey, hold on. How are you?